Those Black Eyes by Matt James, also going by MJC. In our despair, darkness comes to life and eats us. Abilene, a forgettable city in the outskirts of West Texas. It was once a bright, friendly place to live, raise children, and call home. But that had been some time ago. These days, Abilene was crumbling as aging buildings are left to rot, not sparing those that still cling to them. Abilene has one of the lowest income levels with one of the highest costs of living, molding a community with fatigued and angry souls. Perhaps, just maybe, that's why they came here first. The desperation, the ugliness, calls to them. "Sarah!" yelled Jack, the shift supervisor. "Yeah, boss," Sarah called back with more than a little sarcasm in her voice. To say she didn't get along well with Jack would be an understatement. She loathed him. The way he creepily smiled at her made her skin crawl, and the way he told her to do things felt just wrong. Like he was telling her to do something not because it was her job to tell her, but because it gave him power to make her do it. Why the store manager picked him over her, she didn't know. She took the thought back. It was because he kissed her butt, and she ate that shit up. That is something she simply wouldn't do. But why, dear God, did she put him on her shift? Revenge for not kissing her butt? Well, if her father had taught her anything, it was to do your job and do it well, but at the same time to stand up for your own dignity. And she remembered it, even if her father forgot it himself. "Did you clean up the coffee machine?" Sarah bit her tongue. "No," she told herself. "Do not take the bait." "Of course, Jack." Damn it. She took the bait. "Really? I'm going to go check it." "Why don't you go do that then?" Jack stopped, his skinny twig body momentarily shaking before he squeezed his hand and forced himself to calm. He turned and Sarah saw his frustrated eyes behind his big round glasses, but he didn't snap. Instead, he smiled and said, "You know, why don't you go home for the rest of the night, and tomorrow me, you, and Amanda can have a chat." "Oh, snap," Rex, who was working the cash register, said, smiling, whipping out his phone. No doubt to tell everyone in the employee group chat that Sarah was in trouble. "Crap," Sarah whispered. "What was that?" Jack said. "I said fine," she said, already heading for the doors. This job was stupid anyways, and was starting to get in the way of her studies. She was proud of herself and hoped that Mom, already in heaven, would be proud as well. She was going to be the first doctor in the family. Well, do most people consider veterinarians doctors? They do if they want their pets healthy, she decided. That thought made her feel better as she forced herself outside the doors of the McDonald's and into the lightly cool spring air of West Texas. Sarah hurried to her car, not wanting to be seen alone this late at night, as it was already past midnight, and North First Street was not a place she really felt comfortable being at. But once inside her car, the uncomfortable feeling of being alone dissipated, and once again all she could see was Jack's stupid face. Was he really going to get her fired? She didn't even know why the stupid moron hated her so much, besides the fact that it had been between him and her getting the nighttime supervisor role. Was that really all it took for him to hate her so much? She leaned her head back in her seat, trying not to cry, but she couldn't help it. "Okay," she said to herself. "Get it together, girl." She pulled her keys out of her pocket and turned the ignition, and nothing but a creak and a flashing overhead light, then dead. She turned the key over again, and once more the car gave a whine and died. "Ah, shit!" she screamed, slamming her fist into the car steering wheel over and over again. "Why? Heaven me!" she screamed, still slamming her fist into the wheel as if it was not only the face of the car, but the face of all her problems. The steering wheel was her shitty car. It was Jack and Amanda. It was her increasingly demanding schoolwork. It was Rex's stupid, constant group chats. It was the death of her mom. and it was her lackluster father who didn't know how to comfort her. It was all these things until it wasn't. When she was once again breathing, she was holding herself, letting her tears flow, and when that was done, she took a deep breath and finally pulled out her phone. She meant to call her father, but instead she decided to call John, her boyfriend, for the past 2 months. "Hello?" came John's voice. "I'm sorry," Sarah cried. "Did I wake you?" "It's fine, babe. What's up?" Sarah usually yelled at him when he called her babe, but this night was different. All she wanted was out of here, and for all Sarah cared at the moment, he could have called her sexy biatch. "Hey, can you come pick me up? My stupid effing car won't start, and, well, I just don't want Dad right now, you know? Please? I'll owe you one." "Oh, yeah?" John said, and Sarah could feel his smile from the other side of the line. She smiled back and said, "Oh, yeah, baby. Cool, girl. McDonald's, right?" "Unfortunately," she said, feeling the bite of the night's events. John felt the tone change and said more seriously, "Okay, I'll be right there," and hung up the phone. Sarah bit her lip, wishing he would have stayed on the line, but whatever, he was on the way. Crap. Until then, she thought she was stuck here in this parking lot with the scrawny alley cats behind the dumpster and the wandering homeless. Craptastic. She kept her phone out and started watching various TikTok videos, hoping to keep her mind busy. She hadn't noticed that she wasn't alone. The knock on her window made Sarah jump, and she hit the roof of her car and she winced in pain. She turned to the window expecting to see a dirty, bearded man asking for change, but was shocked to see an older child, maybe around 13 years old, looking back at her. He was pale with long, curly hair and was wearing a solid orange, dark hoodie and cargo shorts. She stopped at his eyes, which she couldn't make out. Sarah rolled down her window, and only then did she realize the child's eyes were solid black. She felt her stomach lurch and her skin grow cold. A wave of dizziness came over her, and for a moment, the world spun.
Come in.
The boy said in more of an echo than an actual voice. Sarah, for the life of her, wanted to scream, even screech the word no, but her tongue slipped. Those eyes called to her in a way nothing else did. The more she looked at the boy, the more those black eyes seemed less threatening, and the more she saw a scared child. Slowly, oh so slowly, she opened the door of her car. "We bring you the shocking news report from North 1st Street here in Abilene, Texas. A gruesome discovery was made last night after police received calls that no one was answering the drive-thru box at the local McDonald's. A safety check was made only for the officer to call in multiple bodies found. Later it was announced there were 3 victims, all brutally stabbed to death. The victims' names are Jack R. Randall, Alexander Fabian, and Rex A. Sanders. At this time, this case is under investigation, and anyone with information is urged to contact the police. We call for peace with the families at this difficult time. Police also ask that people stay away from the restaurant as it is an active crime scene. Police are also interested in an individual that may be involved and is considered at large. Please, if anyone has any information on Sarah J. Manducare, they are urged to call immediately." Darren was sitting heavily on his armchair, watching the woman in the beige jacket announce the call of search for his missing daughter. His eyes were stung red, and he was nursing a whiskey glass without being sure of how much he already had. Sometimes he hated the modern world which they lived. The way she announced that his daughter was missing was borderline accusatory. Did they really believe his daughter, weighing barely above 100 pounds, could overpower 3 young men with nothing but a knife? The killer, whoever he was, had clearly taken his daughter captive. He couldn't stand the thought of what she was going through right now. What was he even doing here, sitting in this damned chair instead of out there looking for her? Deep down he knew that he wouldn't find her, but he didn't care. His daughter needed him. She was being held captive or worse, and the police had told him to stay home and keep the phone close. Well, screw that. He was going out. He had to move. He had to do something. It only took a moment for Darren to grab his car keys and head to the front door. On the other side, when the door opened, a man was already standing there, sending Darren 3 feet back in shock. The man's nose twitched and he said, "You just opened the door and I can already smell the alcohol. You weren't planning on driving, were you?" It took Darren a few blinks, but at last he recognized the man. Of course not, Detective. I just saw you pull in, is all." "I see. That explains the shock and the car keys in your hands." The detective was a taller man in his mid to late 40s, bald head, but his short-cut beard was sporting thick gray hairs. He wore a dark blue suit that looked a bit rough around the edges, almost obviously unpressed for several days now. His eyes were dark brown and looked very tired, matching his suit. "Mr. Manducare, please don't lie to me. I am very tired." Darren blinked again, looking at the car keys in his hand. Darren himself was a man in his older 30s, but a lifetime of drinking and smoking made him look older. The unexpected death of his wife a few years back didn't help anything with that regard. He sheepishly put the keys in his jean pocket. "I'm sorry, Detective. I just can't stay here anymore." "Good. We could go down to the station then." "Excuse me? I'm not going to the station." "Then I don't want to see those keys out again. We have all our units looking for your daughter, Mr. Manducare. Your going out there in your condition will only cause more problems." "You mean drunk?" "I mean distressed. I have a little girl of my own, so I can only imagine." "No, you can't. Why are you here, Detective?" "Can I come inside?" Darren grunted and walked back into the house. The house was ordinary, with plank wood flooring, a sofa set with inoffensive but bland coloring cloth cushions, a fireplace that had never been used that was taped shut, a bookshelf that was lined with old westerns. It was clean, but only just so. The true atmosphere of the place was loneliness. No decorations and few pictures, but the dark foreboding of the place came from the lack of proper lighting, sending dark shadows behind every corner. It also stank of stale cigarette smoke that seemed to linger in the hot 85-degree air. The detective stopped to look at one of the few pictures on the wall showing a happy family, a father, mother, and 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. The Darren in the picture seemed a lot more happy than the one in the room with him. "Does your boy know?" Darren shook his head. "Can't reach him. He's on deployment." "Military?" "Army," Darren confirmed. Darren sat back down on the lone recliner in the room, reaching for his box of cigarettes. "Please don't," the detective asked. "My house, and you are the one who wanted to come inside," Darren said, lighting the cigarette. "And why is that?" "What do you know about John?" "Who?" "John Dinkley. He's the last person your daughter called before going missing, leaving 3 dead boys. This is just speculation, mind you, but I figured it was far more likely that John was involved in the murder versus your daughter, don't you think?" Darren stared confused. "I'm sorry, I don't know anyone named John or why my Sarah would be calling him." The detective almost imperceptibly shook his head. "How well do you know your daughter, Mr. Manducare?" "What type of question is that?" Darren said, letting out a puff of smoke. "I asked because all I had to do was interview a few of Sarah's friends and surviving co-workers to know that Mr. Dinkley was Sarah's boyfriend for the last few months, and you don't know anything about him." "Sarah had a boyfriend?" The detective more visibly shook his head this time. "She's not a little girl anymore, Mr. Manducare. She's a young lady, and seeing the state of yourself and this house, well, what? I think I know why she didn't confide in you." Darren stood up, letting the cigarette fall to the ground, his alcohol-bloated blood filling with anger. "Get the hell out of my house, and don't you fucking dare come back unless you find her." The detective showed no signs of emotions as he stood up, and slowly made his way back to the front door. One more thing.
Darren, your wife is dead. Your wife is dead. She's probably in hell right now. In hell right now. Your son is in a hole right now. In a hole right now. Your daughter is soaked in blood. Soaked in blood.
The door closed, leaving Darren alone. In raging anger, he threw the half-empty whiskey bottle at the door and watched as 1,000 shattered glass and whiskey bits rained down and spread across the floor. Sarah didn't have any effing boyfriend. Not my baby girl. She would have told me. She's going to school to be a doctor, helping people. She doesn't have time for that. Besides, I told her what happens when you fall in love early, having kids when you're only a kid yourself like I was. And what was that? The darkness of the house seemed to ask. You're stuck, Darren answered. Is that what your children made you and your dead wife, Darren? Stuck. Darren screamed again, reaching for the keys in his pocket, and rushed out the front door. In an alcoholic daze, he pulled open his car door, pushed it into gear, and pulled out of his drive. The moment he was on the street, red and blue flashing lights appeared behind him. Mr. Manduker, how do you feel? Darren found himself in a small interrogation room, a little bigger than a closet. There was a single light bulb dangling on a string, the type he remembered his grandmother having in her old farmhouse. He was seated in front of a plain metal table on an uncomfortable metal chair. He counted himself lucky that at least he wasn't handcuffed to the table. Like someone bashed my head in with a hammer and then locked me in a cage with 30 other men for the last 24 hours. I must apologize, Detective. I didn't even bother to remember your name. I'm Detective Rhodes, and I'm sorry for throwing you in the drunk tank, but you didn't leave me much choice. I can't have you driving drunk on my watch, not to mention the media. Let's just say that wouldn't be doing your daughter any favors. No, you're right. Anyways, I think you would like to know we found John's car. Your daughter's boyfriend? Darren perked up, his full attention on the man in front of him. Was she there? Is she safe? Detective Rhodes held up his hand. We found the car just outside Ty. John's disembodied head was found drained of blood, almost as if it was sucked out, and superglued to the dash of the car. What? That's not all. His eyes were missing. A small detail we left out of a report at the McDonald's scene so not to inspire copycats. The killer is taking the victim's eyes. Darren felt a hard lump in his throat and his mouth turned dry. Detective, you can't possibly believe... Did you know, Detective Rhodes interrupted, that there is no video evidence at either killing scene? Pretty amazing in 2023, don't you think? The security system just happened to fail at that particular moment. Is your daughter a hacker or programmer or something? What? No, of course not. Yeah, but you said that she didn't have a boyfriend. Think, Mr. Manduker, think. How is she doing this? She isn't. She can't possibly be. Are you covering for her? Hiding her away? No! Please stop. No. Find her. You will see. She is the sweet and innocent. Please stop. You're killing me. Darren screamed, dropping his head to the cold, indifferent metal table, letting his tears and snot coat the surface. Detective Rhodes took a deep breath. Okay, Mr. Manduker. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw you back into jail, and you're going to serve time for a DUI. Your house will be on surveillance 24/7, and if your daughter doesn't make an appearance, then perhaps I will believe you. Oh, and I can't stop you, but don't go talking to the media, okay? Breaking update, said the lady in a flickering TV screen dressed in a dull brown blouse and skirt. boyfriend of Sarah Manducare found decapitated and attached to the dashboard of his motor vehicle outside of town. Public is strongly urged to call the Abilene Police Department if you have any information. Reward for any credible information leading to the whereabouts of Sarah set at $100 grand. Additionally, McDonald's on North 1st Street is back open and are having a first murder special, half off all Big Mac meals. Darren was dropped off at his house by an unmarked police car with a ticket on where his car had been towed. Bastards. I was arrested right outside my own damn drive and they towed my car away. Dicks, Darren told himself. He sniffed himself and recoiled. And I smell like jail. What a effing month. It has been over a month since the last news broadcast, and now the only media coverage of the murders is on Facebook over angry customer comments on the end of the McDonald's murder special. The reward for information on Sarah was quietly dropped, and even Detective Rhodes seemed to forget who Mr. Manducare even was. Perhaps one day Sarah might be featured on an unsolved case special on TV, and that only because her boyfriend's murder was so spectacular. Darren thought that was the word the reporter used during his jail cell interview, which never aired as far as he knew. Darren watched the police car till it was out of sight and walked into his house. It was uncomfortably hot, even for him, and before even flipping on the lights, he went to his thermostat and turned on the AC. It was then that he noticed the door to his daughter's room was open. Shocked, Darren stood, looking at the open door. In a flash of anger, Darren slammed the door shut. How dare they enter his house without a say-so? Detective Ronald or Randall or whoever he was going to hear about this intrusion into his privacy, and he didn't care if they had some damned warrant. To enter his home while they held him in jail? Without another thought, Darren walked into the kitchen for the whiskey cabinet. His thoughts and actions were abruptly interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Darren huffed in annoyance. He turned around towards the door and once again found himself in a state of shock. Outside the window by the front door, he could see the sky was pitch black. Impossible. It had been smack in the middle of the day when the police had dropped him off a few minutes ago. The door knocked louder, more insistent. Shaking, Darren walked towards the front door. How? Why? His hand was sweating by the time he gripped the door handle and pulled it open. Much to his relief, the sun didn't disappear. Instead, it was one of those freak Texas storms that appear out of nowhere. Though this one seemed more violent and darker than most, the type that spawned many a twister. But Darren, at this point, would prefer a twister roll him away to the fairy world of Oz. This relief was short-lived as his gaze turned towards the young man who had knocked on his door. He wore a dirty orange hoodie, ripped cargo shorts, and unkempt, messy brown hair. It was the boy's eyes that Darren couldn't see, and that disturbed him, feeling deep inside of himself that this was a dangerous predator.
Come in.
The boy said in his unearthly voice. Darren felt his head swim and his body go numb, and would have been lost save a loud ringing from his cell phone which pierced the tense air. In a panic, Darren fumbled the door shut, closed the blinds to the side window. Thunder shook the house. The phone call went unanswered. What the hell? I need whiskey. Darren ran for the kitchen. He pulled open the cabinet door only to see an empty shelf. Vaguely, he remembered smashing it at the front door. Okay, relax, Darren told himself. I just got out of jail. I deserve a drink. My daughter is missing, and I don't have a job anymore. I don't need a job. I need whiskey. My son's bike in the garage. Darren ran back to the front door, only to be stopped by a blurry orange haze outside of the window blinds. Was the boy still there? A knock at the window answered his question.
Come in.
Reverberated in Darren's mind. Go away, you bastard! Darren screamed, running back towards the living room. He fell heavily on his sofa, feeling his mind crack. Was he really scared of this boy? Thunder interrupted his thoughts, and he heard a faint bump come from the hall. Shit, someone was inside the house. Darren stood back up and ran towards his bedroom, pulling the gun he hid from behind his pillow. Only then did he feel the courage to scream out, "Who's there? Come on out, and I might not shoot you." "Dad," came the soft reply of a girl. "Sarah?" Darren ran back into the hall, stopping outside of his daughter's bedroom. He paused, breathing heavily. "Please, God." He knocked and entered the bedroom. Nothing was there except the pink walls, bed full of stuffed animals, a desk piled high with freshman college textbooks and unfinished homework, and various posters of kittens. A stink was in the room, and Darren had to force back a gag. In the other corner of the room was a small table with a hamster cage on it. Darren didn't have to look inside it to know what he would find, a starved rodent. But what he didn't expect to see was that the already half-decomposed hamster had its head removed and the eyes missing. Darren couldn't help it. He threw up his last jail cell meal and fell to his knees. "Dad?" came his daughter's voice from behind him. He spun around, but nothing was there. "Where are you?" he screamed. I don't know," came her weak reply. Darren slammed his fist into the wall, falling back to his knees again, screaming, "Where are you?" He gripped the door frame, pulling himself up. "Nora, my beloved wife, where are you? I need you. Help me find her." "I'm here, Dar," came the voice of Nora. "Nora!" Darren stood up, looking into the dark hall. There, at the end of the hall, stood a tall figure covered with shadow, but feminine in shape. A shape Darren would have known anywhere. "You lost our children, Dar." "No, it wasn't me. I trusted them to you, and you lost them." "I didn't mean to." "Now you must pay my toll. Let the boy in, Darren." Thunder shook the house. "What?" "Let the boy in, Darren. He has our daughter." Darren took a hesitant step towards the shadow woman as he drew near. She never came quite into focus, but she did move by his side, and he felt the force of her presence. But it was wrong, and he felt his gut clenched tight and his heart filled with dread. The shadow gripped his arm and moved him towards the front door. "Do it for me," she whispered into his ear. "What about our son?" There was a harsh laugh. "Since when did you care about him? Open the door, Dar." The front door now stood in front of Darren, and the force of the dread almost kept him from moving, but the soft coaxing of his dead wife forced his hand on the door handle, and he did pull it open. The boy stood there now, drenched in water, his eyes black and all-seeing as they'd been perhaps since mankind was young, huddled around dark campfires.
Come in.
"Dad!" came Sarah's voice. "No!" "Let him in," whispered Nora. Darren looked around, searching for his daughter, but all he saw was the shadow of his dead wife. Then in her shadow he saw his wife's eyes. They were big, bright, and filled with tears. "Let him in, my beloved." "Yes," Darren said. "You can come in." The boy smiled as Darren fell backwards, landing hard on the wooden floor as the shadow of his wife was replaced by an image of his daughter being bitten and torn by other black-eyed children. Then she too was gone. Now was only the boy who stood over the man. "What are you?" Darren screamed.
Hungry.
The boy answered. In other news today, Darren J. Manducare has been reported missing by the Abilene Police Department. The lack of a body suggests he ran away, possibly with his daughter Sarah, who was recently wanted for connection with the McDonald's murders as well as her boyfriends. The mystery certainly deepens. But it's not all grim, as McDonald's once again has the murder special and is expanding it to include other menu items. Oh, and if anyone has any information, be sure to contact the police or whatever. In other news, a woman said a boy with an orange sweater wearing black contact lenses was trying to gain access to her house. She said she kept the door closed and prayed to God that he would just go away, and eventually he did. The woman is convinced that he was a demon after what she claims her dead husband was trying to tell her to open the door. She said only the prayers saved her. Well, Troy, what do you think? Demons and murder? I don't know, Diane, but maybe we should all keep crucifixes around the house, Troy laughed. The TV snapped off as a wounded soldier laid in a hospital bed, disgusted by everything and everyone, wishing only that his father would call. Hey, thank you for listening. It means a lot to me that you reached it this far. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Now, if I could ask a favor, please like and subscribe if you haven't. Share the video if you want, and always know that I appreciate all of you.